webcast. And we are recording. And hopefully we'll see, we have an attendee popping in. Great. Now I have to remember how to share everything. Oops. Good evening, everyone. We'll give it just a minute or two as our attendees are flying in right now. So thank you for your patience. We'll begin shortly. All right, our attendee stream seems to be slowing to a lull, so I think we're ready to get going. Kristen and Claire, are you guys all set? All right.
Ready. All good.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our Board of Education and our Superintendent, Dr. Prentice Lee, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. My name is Kelly Hartweg, and I am the Director of Special Services for Community High School District 128. Welcome to our parents, our guardians, and our students of the class of 2025. It's an unbelievable number to be saying right now. Tonight, we have families coming to us from 4 public middle schools in addition to private and parochial schools. And we look forward to getting to know and work with each of you over your student's high school career. Before we get going, a few items of housekeeping to be aware of. If you need closed captioning and it's not already appearing at the bottom of your screen, you can move your mouse over the screen, and at the bottom, the toolbar should pop up showing you an option to turn on your closed captioning. Also, there is an icon at the bottom of your screen called Q&A. If you use that box to type in any questions, we will see those questions as we're going through the evening, and we'll respond either live or we will type answers. But when we reply to your question, everyone will then be able to see it in that Q&A box, just so you know. A link to this recording will be posted on the District 128 Special Services website by the end of the day tomorrow. That will be available on YouTube with closed captioning. And if you'd like a copy of our PowerPoint presentation from today at any point, please feel free to email any of us and we'll be happy to get it to you. So let's get going here. We know that high school can feel like a really big place. When you look at the numbers, it is large. At Libertyville High School next year, we are on track to have 1,850 students. And at Vernon Hills, we're estimated to have just under 1,500. That is large when you're coming from a smaller middle school environment. Our buildings offer students the option to take over 200 course offerings, with the diversity of content growing every year to engage our student population in college, career, and cultural readiness experiences. We also offer over 100 athletics and activities, which will be described more a bit as we go through the evening. But let's begin by making this large setting a little bit smaller and introduce you to some of the most important people that your high schooler will get to know in the next 4 years. First, I'd like to introduce Claire DeBella. Claire is our 504 coordinator, or student needs specialist, we call her, at Libertyville High School. And she will be working with all of our incoming Wildcats. At Vernon Hills High School, we have Kristen Miller, also the 504 coordinator or student needs specialist, who will be working with all of our incoming freshmen and all of our students with 504 needs over the next 4 years. Our schools believe that learning is an individual process that at times requires individual approaches and supports. In striving to support the development of the D128 graduate who is daring as they enter their post-secondary world, members of your students' learning support team will collaborate to monitor and implement specialized plan for all students who have disabilities or impairments that may require specific accommodations and services. Our 75 incoming freshmen across the district who have 504 plans are not a small minority. And there are many other students who have 504 plan accommodations in the high schools. At LHS next year, we are on track to have 173, or 9% of our student population with 504 plans. And at Vernon Hills next year, we will have 121, or 8% of our student population who will have 504 plans. We find often, in particular with freshmen, that they believe that they are the only one who needs assistance or needs accommodations. And they often feel embarrassed or shy away from using them when they need them. Please assure your student this is not the case. The very nature of our mission statement recognizes that the high school experience is unique to each student, and every single one accesses different supports from different people, different places, different accommodation tools along the way. It is important to remember that a student's experiences in high school should support their growth into young adults who take ownership in actively participating in, planning for, and advocating for their needs in their own learning process. Your student is now opening a door that will take 4 years, but once they walk through it, they will become an adult who will need to understand their own disability or impairment, the ways in which it impacts them, and the accommodations that best allow them to succeed in learning and eventually working. Because once they leave high school, it is they who must advocate on their own to get the supports that they need. Their parents won't be able to do that for them anymore. While all persons with disabilities and impairments have protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, the mandates of this law look different in the public school setting versus the post-secondary school setting. When your child is in the K-12 school system, the school is responsible for monitoring whether your student may have a disability or impairment, for evaluating them for eligibility for special education or 504 accommodation services, and for providing those accommodations and adjusting the plan as may be necessary. In college, however, the ADA protects a person with disabilities from discrimination, but it becomes that person's responsibility to disclose their disability, to request approval for accommodations, and to advocate for those accommodations or changes within their university's disability support office. Likewise, at work, it will be your adult child who will need to know what accommodations will allow them to be successful employees and will allow them, and they will have to advocate on their own for the appropriate accommodations to help them be successful and competitively employed. A year ago, I can't believe this is a year ago, I participated in a roundtable with 40 university representatives who came from community colleges, state colleges, small private schools, and even Big Ten universities across the Illinois area and the Midwest. Those representatives shared that it is most common to find that college freshmen who are struggling when they are in their first semester often either did not register with the Disability Services Center in the summer or fall to request accommodations for their learning, even though those students often had 504 plans or IEPs when they were in the high school. They reached out for support from the Disability Services Center, typically in November, as final exams were nearing and the students were beginning to realize that they were in trouble without accessing accommodations or getting supports. The second highest correlation that the university disability advocates reported was that students with disabilities who struggled to succeed that the students who were struggling were often connected to students who did have an accommodation plan at the college setting, but who chose not to access their own accommodations or support resources. So either they had it in high school and didn't ask for it in college, or they did ask for it in college, but then didn't access it. Those were the two groups that they reported on. These findings align with the findings of the 2012 National Longitudinal Transition Study conducted by the National Center for Special Education Research. And as an example, in this research, it was found that students who had access to assistive technology tools in high school, but who then did not use those tools in college, had a lower four-year graduation rate than their peers who regularly use their assistive technology, as well as a lower success rate in accessing or in successfully completing post-secondary education experiences and employment opportunities. We're not meaning to imply here that every student needs an assistive technology. This is just one facet that the study looked at, and this will be conducted again in 2022. So it'll be interesting to see what the study finds 10 years later. We know that our job is already beginning as your student comes to high school in not only supporting them in becoming a self-aware learner who understands and advocates for their accommodations in high school effectively, but also in increasing their ability to do all of this independently so that they can increase their success as young adult learners in their post-secondary endeavors. While it is important to recognize and understand the end goal for your student, let's come back to the very first steps because that's where they're just embarking upon. Let's focus on entering high school. As you may be aware, by the end of the high school experience, your student will have earned a total of 22 credits, consisting of Illinois State Board of Education requirements such as PE, English, health, and the other subjects that you see listed on the screen. And also, they will have a variety of other classes that your student may elect to take to further enrich his or her path to their post-secondary pursuits and to explore areas of interest. Your student's school counselor will support him or her in developing a 4-year course of study and in updating it annually at minimum that is appropriately rigorous and balanced. While we encourage each student to strive for a rigorous high school experience, we strongly encourage them to have a balance in academics, interests, and extracurricular experiences, because we know high school is more than just a transcript. At this time, Kristen and Claire will take over the conversation to discuss their role as 504 coordinators and how they have already begun and will continue up until next August to prepare for your child's transition to Libertyville and Vernon Hills High School. Thank you again for being here, and don't forget to use the chat for the Q&A if you have questions tonight. Claire?
Hello, how are you, everyone? As a quick overview before we get into how we provide supports at each of our schools, we want to revisit with you the idea that Section 504 accommodation plans are for students who have physical or mental impairments that substantially limit one or more major life activities, including their functioning in the school setting. These students require accommodations in order to have equal access to opportunities for success in the educational environment. We'll talk more about accommodations, but first we want to go over a timeline of events as to how we will help transition your 8th graders to the high school setting. Long before your students begin their freshman year, Kristen and I are working with the middle schools to help make their transition as smooth as possible. Beginning in the fall of their 8th grade year, Kristen and I meet with the middle school staff to discuss their 8th graders with 504 plans and to share information on supports they may need. In January, each high school presented incoming freshman orientation webinars to help explain the registration process for freshman year courses. For students with a Section 504 accommodation plan, course placement is determined by map testing and middle school teacher input. These data points are reviewed by the high school department supervisors, who will then make the final recommendation that you will see mailed home. You can complete course requests on your own, or your child can sign up for an optional meeting with a counselor via Zoom. Libertyville High School counselors will be visiting with middle schools by appointments on Zoom the week of February 8th, and virtual appointments for course recs are available with Vernon Hills High School counselors 2-4 and 2-9. And course requests for freshmen, just a reminder, are due Friday, February 12th for Libertyville High School, and at Vernon Hills, they are due on February 16th. So throughout the school year, Kristen and I attend students' 8th grade 504 annual review and transition meetings to discuss accommodation updates to fit the high school setting, building resources, and how to access accommodations at the high school. Then in May and June, we transfer the 8th grade plans onto District 128 paperwork, and we will be emailing you home a copy of that plan. And in August, right before the official start to the school year, freshmen can attend a freshman orientation that helps them get acclimated to their new school. So at the high school, 504 plans are case managed by school counselors. The school counselor, you'll hear us say this a few times, are really the point person for the 504 plan, as they are the ones that are communicating with your student and with the teachers. Kristen and I, as student needs specialists, will attend all the 504 meetings and coordinate the documentation and the evaluations. From our 8th grade articulation and transition meetings, Kristen and I provide information to counselors and discuss each student. Counselors will then share the 504 plan with your students' teachers at the beginning of each semester, so that teachers will have access to 504 accommodation plans on the first day of school. Counselors strive to meet with students on their 504 caseload during that first week or so of school to introduce themselves, to review the accommodations, and how students can access support in the high school. So at the high school, 504 plans are reviewed annually to ensure accommodations are aligned with student need and to match up with how their impairment is affecting their functioning in the school setting. We ask that students attend all their 504 meetings as we feel it's really important for them to understand what their accommodations are and how their impairment affects them so that they can advocate for their needs. In terms of reviews, we'll meet midway through your student's freshman year to see how the accommodation plan is working. We'll look at teacher feedback and discuss progress in classes and how your student is adapting to the new high school environment. During their sophomore year, we'll complete a periodic reevaluation to determine if your student continues to be eligible for the Section 504 accommodation plan. You'll receive an email from us with a consent form outlining what data will be collected, and once signed and returned, the evaluation will begin. Typical reevaluations include teacher feedback, medical updates, student interviews. We look at present levels of academic performance or any other information that's pertinent to meeting your students' needs. And then in junior and senior year, we present annual review options where we'll email you options of either continuing the plan as is, updating information in the additional notes, or having a meeting to discuss accommodations and students' progress.
Okay, hi. I'm going to talk a little bit about accommodations in the high school setting and also beyond. So when students enter high school, there are certain things we consider when thinking about accommodations and adjusting accommodations throughout their time with us. As we've kind of mentioned already, one of our goals is to help students be successful not only while they're with us, but again, to teach them skills and strategies so that they can be independently successful in their post-secondary education, in trade school, or later in their career field. One of the ways that we do this is really by making sure that the accommodations on their plan are prescriptive. And what that means is basically those accommodations need to relate back to what the student's physical or mental impairment is and how that impairment is substantially limiting them in the school setting. We want to make sure that the plan has only appropriate accommodations that directly address your child's needs, so we're not disabling students by over accommodating them. And this has been the number one concern that we have heard from our conversations with universities, so we always want to be mindful of that as students progress throughout their high school career. Another thing I wanted to mention is students will also be more of in the driver's seat, literally in driver's ed class, but they'll be in the driver's seat for their 504 plan as well. We want them to be the owners of their plan. As we've said, they're going to be at their meetings. We want their feedback because this plan is really all about them. And it's going to be an essential skill for them once they leave high school to be able to articulate their needs, understand their disability, and advocate for those supports on their own. So I mentioned the word appropriate accommodations, and that can be defined a number of ways. One of the ways that we determine what an appropriate accommodation is, or one thing that we're considering, is if the accommodation is developmentally appropriate. So as you can imagine, students may have different needs when they're in first grade, to when they're in seventh grade, to when they're freshmen in high school, and even different when they leave high school. So we want to make sure that those accommodations make sense for their developmental age, their maturity, and also they're going to be learning skills throughout their high school career by meeting with their counselors, with social workers, their PAWS teacher, and they're also going to be learning things just through the general expectations that are set in the classroom setting. So to bridge students to more independence, we really do emphasize that self-advocacy. And there are some accommodations that we find that students are needing less of in high school as they develop. And this is not to say that this wouldn't be on a student's 504 plan, but one of the things that students tend to move away from as they become better self-advocates is if they have an accommodation for teachers proofreading their work, or prompting them to review their answers. Our goal is how can we teach them that skill of prompting themselves to review their answers, or if they need help in proofreading their work, how can we teach them how to connect with their teachers through office hours or through other resources in the building as well. Another thing we discuss when we're talking about appropriate accommodations is if the accommodations truly are accommodations. And what I mean by that is we want to make sure we're accommodating students, but not modifying any curriculum expectations. And so the reason for that is because grades on high school transcripts are sent to colleges and universities, and we need to be mindful of how those universities are going to interpret that information. So we want grades to be reflective of the curriculum and course expectations, the rigor of the course, and what students have been expected to learn and understand. So some examples of modifications that don't align to the high school setting would be a modified workload, limiting homework that's expected for a course, or changing the rigor or difficulty level of an exam by modifying the content on the exam. So, we are mindful that high school is a big jump from middle school, and we want to make sure that students' needs are being met. So if students are struggling significantly when they don't have those modifications on their 504 plans, that's a great time to reach out and have that discussion with the school counselor, with us. Are there different or other ways that we can accommodate for your student? Do they need a support period in their day? Or also, do we need to find a better balance? So we have courses at a variety of different levels, and we want to make sure that the courses that they're enrolled in are matched to their instructional level. And so this next slide is just an example of something that we've received from the College of Lake County and how accommodations may look different from the high school setting to the college or university setting. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. One of the things that jumped out to me is the extended time to submit assignments. And you'll probably hear from us that we try to move away from that in the high school setting, because we know that when students leave us, that's not going to be something that's very flexible for them moving on. And we also see that a lot of times when students are late in turning in a lot of their work, it tends to snowball and they find themselves in a hole, and we hate to see them in that position. Another example on this chart that jumped out to me was students that need their tests read aloud. Maybe at younger ages, it makes sense to have a TA or a teacher read them their assessment out loud. But as we transition to high school and beyond, what we'd like to see is students independently utilizing something like a text-to-speech feature with a recording of their test, which just allows for easier access to that accommodation as needed. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about everyone's favorite topic, standardized testing. We have two major organizations that we work with for standardized testing. One is the College Board, and the College Board governs PSAT tests, SAT, and all AP tests. The ACT is a different company, but we also work with them when students want to take those exams. So for students to have accommodations on those standardized tests, what happens is our special testing coordinators will apply for students to receive their accommodations, and then the College Board or ACT will review the information that's submitted and make a decision. One of the things that College Board has changed a little bit in the last year or so is they have asked us if students are consistently using their testing accommodations in the school setting, if we're applying for those accommodations for standardized testing. So You'll probably notice that at our annual review 504 meetings and our reevals, we are collecting some feedback and data on that, so we can make sure that we have that documentation to show that your child is using their accommodations, and then we don't have any issues with those getting approved. Accommodations are typically approved. I don't want to scare anyone, but in the event that they aren't, the College Board and ACT will outline exactly the information that they felt was either missing or didn't substantiate the accommodation. So at that point, it is up to families if they decide they want to appeal in that process. And Claire and I both have a lot of experience in doing that. Hopefully we don't have to experience that with you, but if so, we'll guide you through that and what information might need to be collected. One other note about approved accommodations. In middle school, I know a lot of times when students have testing accommodations, they can decide to opt into their accommodations. With College Board, it looks a little different. So students, once they're approved on College Board accommodations, we as a school are required to provide those accommodations for all tests moving forward. So it's more of a situation where families have to specifically decide to opt out with parent consent as opposed to opt in. And sometimes that surprises some students the first time they take the PSAT when they might be in a different group if they have those testing accommodations. But again, you'll always get notification of when those testing times are coming up, and you will have that option. So let's see. And this is just a list of the Illinois Board of Education testing requirements. So freshman and sophomore year, students will take the PSAT in April. Their junior year, they do have an optional PSAT in the fall in October. And sometimes students choose to take this for an extra practice on the PSAT. It's also the National Merit Qualifying Test. And other students choose to take it because they know certain scores will help them with college scholarships as well. In April of your junior year, or your child's junior year, that's when students will take the SAT, which is a graduation requirement in the state of Illinois. And they will also take the Illinois Science Assessment. If your child is enrolled in AP courses, those exams are typically the very end of April to the beginning of May. It does shift a little bit each year, but I think those dates are set in the fall, and you'll get plenty of notification about that. And during students' freshman year, our special testing coordinator typically applies in December or January for students, so way, way, way before they would ever sit for one of those tests.
All right. So if we're looking at our school-wide resources, we are focused on tailoring school-wide supports in a more specific manner for your student. So we have learning support teams. We refer to them as LSTs, and they're made up of school counselors, team leaders or deans, social workers, the college resource counselor, and a school nurse. So that team meets regularly to review student progress, needs, and to identify students who may have a need for increased support. So they're looking at feedback from teachers, students themselves, or if parents reach out with concerns. We also have academic support centers that are available at both high schools. So at Libertyville, it's called the MASH, and at Vernon Hills, it's called the ARC. So these look a little different at each school, but the concept is still the same. Throughout each period of the school day, there's certified content area teachers that are available to help students on schoolwork and reteaching of concepts in the areas of math, English, science, and world languages. So students can sign up during their study or free period, but they don't need any appointments to meet with these teachers. Also available at these resource areas are peer tutors that are available by appointments. So another school-wide resource is the Testing Center, which is available to all students in a typical school year. So the Test Center, it is used for making up tests if students are absent. For students with accommodations, they may use the Testing Center or the TAC, or the Testing Accommodation Center. So this can be used as an alternate testing location if students don't want to test in their classroom, or they can use it to complete tests while using their extended time accommodation. Another resource that's available to students are structured guided study periods through PAUSE. So PAUSE stands for Program Assisting with Success. So in PAUSE, there are 2 staff members, including a certified teacher. This is kind of as opposed to like a typical regular study hall. It's more of a guided structured one, and the ratio is smaller than a typical study hall, where there's only about 15 students in a class. So in a PAUSE class, students can get help with organization, goal setting, and other executive functioning skills. All right. So here are the Libertyville High School school counselors who are also the 504 case managers. So they're broken down by alphabet in each of their LSTs. And so again, these are your first point of contact for a variety of things, including helping students with their accommodations. They can help students advocate for their accommodations, communicate with teachers, help students understand how to access accommodations at high school, or troubleshoot any problems that come up or changes that need to be made. And the LSTs also have support for students through social workers, speech language pathologists, school nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and hearing itinerants.
And so these are the point people at Vernon Hills High School. These are the school counselors. Again, they'll be the case managers for students who have 504 plans. And this is the general alphabetic breakdown by last name. However, it does shift a little bit from year to year. So if that looks a little bit off and you've been notified otherwise, go with the information you've already received, because this does tend to shift a bit. But these are some of our key players. We also have social workers as well in the LST. While they are broken down by alphabet, they work closely together and interchange seeing students so that students can really see who they feel most comfortable with. We also have a speech language pathologist, our nurses, as well as a hearing itinerant.
So high school activities. Though it may have looked a little different this past year, teams and clubs are available to students to participate in throughout the year. So we encourage all students to get involved to help make connections with the school, other students, and the staff. There's a lot of research that students are more successful academically if they're involved in extracurriculars and activities at their school. They may find a mentor, new friends, and it's just a great way to be involved. So some of our examples you can see: athletics, they have cut and non-cut sports and intramurals. We have competitive groups such as history clubs, scholastic bowl, ping pong, bass fishing, anything that you can think of, we have. We also have performing arts with band, orchestra, orchesis, and theater, career and special interest clubs such as anime, art, computer science, or service clubs. There's cultural clubs for the Black Student Union, Latino Alliance, Jewish Student Union, or Muslim Student Association. We have publications at LHS. We have the Drops of Ink, and at Vernon Hills, it's called the Scratching Post. They also have the yearbook that students can participate in. And then there's the student government and class councils. And I'm sure that I have missed many.
There are so many, and those will be shared with students over and over again at the beginning of the year. So if you missed it now, you didn't miss it. We'll definitely fill you in more. So just a few closing points. Obviously communication is key. We want your children to be successful. We want your child to be successful. Really utilize the school counselors. I think, as we've already said, they're going to be reaching out at the beginning of the year to students. They want to help them understand how to access their accommodations. They can help problem solve if issues do come up. Some other things that may help ease that transition are utilizing PowerSchool. I do believe this is used at Hawthorne District. We also have logins at the high school as well for both students and parents. And there is a helpful tool that I know some parents like, which is they are notified when student grades fall below a certain point. So you can get that set up as well. But also just talk with your child. You know, if they're struggling with something, let us know, have them reach out. You can reach out. We are here to help. You know, we want them to be a good self-advocate, but we know that that takes time, and it's intimidating to start in high school. So let's meet them where they're at and help them along the way. We also would recommend just establishing a routine at the beginning of the school year. I know that seems, you know, pretty basic common sense, but one of the things that we've noticed is, you know, a lot of our 504 students are, I mean, we have bright kids in our district, like super successful kids. And one of the things that surprises them at times is how maybe they didn't have to study as much for tests in middle school, or maybe homework, you know, wasn't as big of a deal. But as they're challenging themselves and the rigor of courses gets more intense, having that established routine will help them be successful, so they don't, you know, hit those hiccups along the way. We'd also say that, we have parent information nights throughout the year, something called our parent series. And that's something that we'll share with you each year. And it'll have all the relevant information about, hopefully not webinars, hopefully in-person informational meetings, and opportunities for us to share resources and find ways to collaborate. So I think that about sums up our conversation. We are so looking forward to working with all of you next year. We know, well, I mean, I think we could all agree it's been a bit of a wonky year, and we want to help students because we know it's going to be a bit more of a transition than it normally would have been. So we're here to help. Reach out to us. We want to be a support, and we're excited to have you coming to D128.
Thank you, Kristen. We've had a couple questions come in as the night's been going on, so I'll just address those and make sure that they're part of our recording. One question that was asked earlier in the evening was, I'm assuming extended time opportunities for tests. The question, I think, is, you know, is it extended time allowed for tests? And to clarify the point that was being shared earlier, extended time is actually a very common accommodation for students for testing purposes. What we tend to need to fade out at all as possible, I should say, is extended time for submitting assignments, because we see that begin to snowball, and then tests need to be delayed, and then a new unit is started, or a new topic of content is started, and the student falls further and further and further behind. And so all we're doing is creating a snowball with extended time for submitting work. So that's where we really try to work very creatively with the student, parents, teachers, to figure out, as part of the whole 504 team, what are some scaffolding accommodations, if you will, that we can address for that workload in order to mitigate the need to extend due date opportunities.
Yeah. I was just going to add, you know, sometimes then the accommodation looks like support on the front end, so we can help students before they find themselves in a position where they're needing extensions.
Exactly, yeah. Another question was asked is there a way to find out how much work is required for certain electives? Kristen or Claire, do either of you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the best, that is, if you're thinking about electives for the freshman year, is to make that appointment with the counselor in one of those Zoom sessions. So I know each high school has a couple dates that are available that you can contact counselors and talk through any electives to get an idea and a real feel of what that course will be like.
Yeah, the counselors definitely have the inside scoop because they're working with kids every day who are giving feedback on what they're experiencing in those classes.
Those are the only 2 questions we've had come in. We'll see if any more trickle in. You know, we got together a little bit before our presentation started this evening and set up some backgrounds that are much prettier to look at on our Zooms, and well, I didn't, but and navigated kids walking through doorways and dogs running in and significant others coming in, and this is a new world for us. It's a weird experience to not have you sitting in front of us and us standing in front of you, because to me that often feels more like a conversation rather than a one-way blast of information. So please know that we really are looking forward to working with you and your students next year. We have some great teams at both of our buildings that are creative, that are there to support your kids. We know that next year is going to be a major hurdle, not just for incoming freshmen, but for all students as we work toward getting back to what normal high school feels like. And the reality is normal may look different. And we don't know what that will be. We are problem solvers in our field, so we look forward to the challenges that may come with it. But we also, in that, our goal is to support your kids in this process of coming to their high school worlds. So thank you for joining us tonight. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to Kristen, Claire, or myself. And thank you again for taking time out of your evening to spend with us. Thank you, Kristen and Claire. Thank you to all of our parents and families who attended this evening. I will leave the webinar running for another minute or two, just in case any additional questions trickle in. Unfortunately, our webinar process doesn't allow for an interactive Q&A. We have to get the questions in and then we can give the answers out.
And if we have transition meetings coming up, we can definitely answer more of those specific questions that relate to your student.
Yeah. We had about a third of our incoming freshman population of students with 504 plans, parents attending this evening. That's a great turnout. Well, I think I'm gonna turn off the recording and the webinar at this point, if I can figure out how to. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Our participants are beginning to exit, so thanks, everybody. Let's see here.